This right here is my new editing and gaming system. At least, I think it is, because today I'm putting it head to head against what I'm currently using, which is this build right here, and only if there is a noticeable upgrade for the stuff that I use the system for, will I actually be upgrading. My current build has a 3090, and this one here actually has a 4090, despite actually being a bit more compact. And at this point, we know how fast the 4090 is. We've reviewed it, we've tested it out. When it comes to 4K gaming and those really demanding single-player ray-traced games, there really is nothing that can come close. But what I'm mostly interested in is when it comes to video editing. How much faster are the exports? What is the video editing experience like? And that content creation workflow that consumes most of my life. That's the primary speed up that I'm mostly looking for here. Now, firstly, a quick recap on this build, because I'm sure some of you are looking at this and thinking, what even is that? Basically, it's the smallest 4090 PC that you can build. It's all packed inside a case called the Formed T1, which is only 10 liters in volume and is entirely CNC aluminium, and the build quality here is the best that I've ever come across. The compromise of this system though is the CPU, so no crazy core counts in this build since we're pretty restricted for the CPU cooler, and here I've gone with the Ryzen 5800X 3D. Don't get me wrong, it's an absolute monster when it comes to gaming, but I'm really interested to see if there's any difference when it comes to editing versus my 12900K. Now, the build is mostly unchanged from when I last showed it off a few videos back with the 4080 and the 4090. Really haven't changed much, only a couple of things, and most notably, I've added a thin foam pad from ᵗⁱ̤ⁿʰ between the CPU cooler fan and the heatsink, because previously I was getting, really high-pitched noise at certain fan speeds, but that foam pad, just adding a bit of space between the fan blades and that densely packed heatsink that we have here, it completely eliminates that high-pitched noise that I was getting. Those who have the Blackridge cooler will know the exact high-pitched noise that I'm talking about. Above 2000 RPM, it's definitely quite noticeable, so I can definitely recommend this mod. At the same time, I haven't noticed any reduction in thermal performance, which is great. It's also very easy to do and install. You just slot the pad in there and you can use the original screws. The other thing that I've done is add a mountain of storage, because that's definitely something that I needed to upgrade on my current system. So here we have a 4TB M.2 NVMe drive that I picked up from Crucial. That's in addition to the 2TB boot drive that I've got in there at the moment. So 6TB of storage to play with in total. That will make working on multiple video projects at the same time a lot easier. Other than that, it's the exact same system. We've got a custom 16-pin cable from Mod DIY, which makes this entire build possible, a Corsair SF750 Platinum for the power supply, and those Phanteks T30 fans, which keep everything running cool. Now, one more thing that I did change was the CPU. It's still the Ryzen 5800X 3D, but I just bought a new one because the one that I was using initially was borrowed from my test bench, and of course I still want to use that one for my test bench, so let's chuck a new one in there for the new system. And usually I wouldn't mention this, after all it's the same CPU, except it isn't. The new one that I installed here actually pulls more power and runs up to 10 degrees warmer under the exact same workloads. Again, identical CPUs, both are Ryzen 5800X 3Ds, same BIOS, same chipset driver, same fan speeds, same everything, but the old one just runs better. And look, in a normal system with a 240mm liquid cooler or something like that, you probably wouldn't notice this difference, but in a system like this, that extra 15 to 20 watts does make a pretty noticeable impact. To be honest, it's pretty surprising. I definitely didn't expect this. Maybe something that I'll take a closer look at in a future video as well. For now though, I'll be using the old one, which for some reason is the superior chip when it comes to power and temperatures. I'll also mention that I've used a third-party tool called PBO Tuner, which effectively allows you to do a precision boost to undervolt on the 5800X 3D, which you typically can't do since it's a locked chip. So this actually comes in pretty clutch and seems to work just as a normal BIOS would with the same settings, and you can also set it up to start automatically with Windows, which is pretty nice. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Why would we go for a 5800X 3D versus the 12900K that's in my current system, especially for a video editing machine? The i9 has 16 cores on tap with some that can boost up to 5 GHz, really a monster of a CPU. Surely that 8-core Ryzen is a massive downgrade. And yeah, if you're doing CPU rendering, CPU encoding, then this is not a good move at all. But the stuff that I do in my workflow rarely ever loads up the CPU. In fact, despite doing some really heavy video editing, 6K raw footage, ProRes footage, super heavy color grading and stuff like that, that's all done on the GPU. Believe it or not, I actually don't have a use case where I really benefit from having 16 cores in my system at all. I mean, it's been kind of nice to have them at my disposal if I've ever needed them, but I can barely ever remember actually using the 12900K to its full potential. So the 5800X3D for me is perfect. It's actually a faster gaming CPU than the i9 while pulling less power, and it does feel a bit more purposeful as well for the workflow that I'm doing. It does feel a bit better knowing that I'm actually using more of the chip compared to the 12900K. Most of the gains here are coming from that monster 4090, but how much faster actually is it? Well, in 4K gaming, with a few titles here tested with ray tracing and DLSS, we're almost looking at double the frame rates versus my current system with the 3090. Now keep in mind that we're also comparing 12900K versus 5800X3D, as well as PCIe Gen 3 versus 4, since the motherboard in my end case has errors running at that Gen 4 speed. But yeah, between 75 and 85% increases here in FPS, that's pretty massive gains. But video editing is what I'm mostly interested in. You know, how much faster are the exports, how much faster is the effect processing and stuff like that. That to me is huge. You know, the 4K gaming stuff is really impressive. I'll definitely be sinking a bunch of hours, you know, in my downtime, but I might not have that downtime to begin with if my video editing also doesn't get a bit of a boost. So I threw together this 10-minute timeline. It's got some 6K Blackmagic footage in there. We've got some 4K A7S III footage, some gameplay clips, slow motion, text, overlays, stuff like that. Basically just a mix of everything that I'd be doing. My current system exported this in 12 minutes and 18 seconds, and the new build did it in 9 minutes and 24 seconds. So it's not bad, definitely not a game changer. We're cutting the render time here by about 25%, and for those super long exports that can take like 30 minutes or longer, it'll be nice to have the video ready to go a bit quicker. Video stabilization, on the other hand, for example stabilizing a slider shot or some handheld footage, that was much quicker on the 4090, and this is something that I do actually have to sit around and wait for to finish before moving forward with the edit. It's not like an export where I can go take a break or get something to eat. My current build stabilized a 10-second clip in just under 10 seconds, and the 4090 build did it in just over 3. So again, this is completely unproductive time, and there have been some projects where I'm basically stabilizing every second clip. Overall, really happy to see a big speed up here. As for the actual timeline performance though, and the overall editing smoothness, the experience felt basically the same between the two builds. No doubt the 4090 is a more powerful GPU, so potentially it's better, but at least in the demanding clips that I threw together here, there wasn't much of a difference that I could feel. Areas with stacked video layers which choked up on the 3090, they still started a bit on the 4090 as well. The last thing that I wanted to see was how the build would be mounted underneath the desk, which is where my current build lives. And yeah, the T1 is a bit smaller, so it doesn't hang as low as the end case does, which is nice. It does overall look a little bit cleaner. The next thing that I noticed though, which is a bit odd, was the 4090 never went into that 0 RPM mode, which it usually does when it's at idle doing nothing, and I could actually just still hear the fans when I was sitting at the desktop. So what I found with this 0 RPM mode, at least for the 4090 FE, but potentially for other NVIDIA GPUs as well, it's not just dependent on the GPU temperature, but also the GPU power. Here you can see the 4090 idling and doing nothing at 40 to 45 watts and 1100 RPM, so that 0 RPM mode is not active, but I found that by lowering my second monitor's refresh rate from 144Hz to 120Hz, the idle power dropped to around 15 watts. That then allowed the GPU to enter that 0 RPM mode at idle and give me completely silent performance. And this is one advantage over my water-cooled end case build that is worth mentioning. You know, the pump on that thing is super quiet, but it's not the dead quiet experience at idle that you can get from an all air-cooled system. At full load though, the T1 build is definitely louder, unleashing 4K ray-traced gaming on this thing. The performance is absolutely ridiculous, but as I mentioned in that initial video where I built this thing, don't expect a quiet experience. I'll admit I did have to take my IEMs out of my ears to really notice the noise in the first place, but if you're pairing 4K gaming alongside open back headphones or recording with the microphone, yeah, this is not the solution that I'd recommend. You'd be much better off with a larger case like the NR200P Max or even a mid-tower. Overwatch 2 at 1440p though is what I'll mostly be playing on this thing, to be honest, and there the noise wasn't an issue. So I have decided that I will be making the switch, you know, after using it as my main desktop system for a few days now. It's a pretty comfortable system, you know, the additional noise doesn't really bother me, and the extra performance and the extra compact form factor is quite nice, but I will be keeping my NCase build saved as a backup. And the reason for that is that I still want to do more content and more experiments with this system without the stress of having it as my only desktop system. So if something does go wrong, I can just switch to the NCase and it's no problem. The next evolution for this build will be a full custom loop with 2 radiators, and I'm really interested to see how the 4090 copes there and whether we can improve the noise and temperatures even further. Worst case, I'll just return back to the air-cooled configuration that we have here because overall I'm pretty happy with it. But regardless, it will be a fun experiment, so definitely subscribe if you want to see that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Looking forward to getting a lot more use out of this system. As always, a huge thanks for watching. Links will be down below for the parts if you guys are interested in doing the same thing. Happy holidays. I'll see you all in the next one.